I think we're ready to get started.
You want louder? Louder?
Is this live? Is this loud enough?
Yes.
Great. If everybody can take a seat, that would be great. Get started. I think this is the first joint JIDS Word event, although JIDS has been in this space a few times. So this is very exciting. We are very lucky to be associated with Word. And I hope you all, if you're not on the email lists, can sign up so that you can get Word emails and JIDS emails.
Feel free to fill up the front.
And there are more chairs over here if we need them. So I'm going to start. We have a wonderful panel today. Very honored to be part of this. And our topic could not be more timely. I don't know about you guys, but if you're involved in interfaith like I am, you sometimes get tired of seeing the same beautiful faces. You love the faces you see, but why am I only seeing the same faces? Why can't we broaden the tent without losing our soul?
We're new faces.
There you go. What can we do to expand into the mainstream of the Jewish community, of the Muslim community, the Christian community, other religious communities, without losing our soul? I have to add that. So, I would like to start, just take a couple of minutes of your time to introduce the poison. And then we have some folks here who know a whole lot about the antidotes. And I will introduce them and then they'll just talk. After that, we're going to have a brief Q&A so that you can ask them questions in this large group. And then we'll break out into small groups because JIDS is the Jewish Islamic Dialogue Society, not a speakers bureau. So, I want to start with something I wrote and something I received. So I have to own what I'm about to tell you because I wrote it in my last book. I'm sorry, my name is Dan Spiro. I should introduce myself. I don't matter though, they do. The interfaith movement is but a fledgling entity, a small tributary off the river of same faith activity. Clergy love to profess their support for the movement, but when push comes to shove, their interfaith activities tend to be modest compared to the energy that they devote to their own kind. When you think about it, that only makes sense. Clergy can expect considerable deference within their own community due to superior knowledge and training. By contrast, when they enter the interfaith arena, they start herding cats. They lose control over the situation and become just like anyone else, crossing their fingers and hoping for the best. Plus, there's not a huge groundswell of support for interfaith work among the faithful. That's because for most congregants, religious activities are like comfort food. And whatever it is you can say about interfaith work, call it rewarding, inspiring, challenging, comfort food it's not. Interfaith dialogue can be frustrating for all concerned. It often takes place on the pablum level, where profound differences are whitewashed and ideas that are presented are worthy of children. Alternatively, the presenters can keep it real, in which case they risk creating widespread animosity. Given the choice, I personally might actually prefer the combat to the kumbaya. But you can see why many would opt for what's behind door number 3. So that's one of the headwinds we face. People who attend congregations and just would rather be with their own kind. And I'm going to now share with you something that I received that tells you just how sick this phenomenon can get. I got this cartoon I won't show it to you, but I will tell you about it. On Friday, at my Department of Justice email, I literally could have been fired if I forwarded it. I view it as pornography. And it was sent by someone that I went to Stanford and Harvard Law School with. It's a man and a woman. The woman is wearing an Obama t-shirt, and they're both young. The man says, "I don't believe that women have any rights, and I think gays should be hanged." The woman says, "Wow, what a complete primitive A blank you are. You must be a Republican." The man says, "No, actually, I'm a Muslim, and those are my religious beliefs." And the woman responds, "Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. I hope you don't think I'm Islamophobic." Now, to me, that's just a microcosm of the problem. That Islamophobia on the left, or I should say on the right, or anti-Zionism on the left, is now such dogma that people are finding clever ways of destroying people who fall into one camp or another. And if you don't agree with them, it must be because you're politically correct. And this is just a way to keep a dialogue out of our lives. Because why would you dialogue with a Muslim? Why would you dialogue with a Zionist? Right? I didn't say a Jew, because it manifests itself in different ways in our society. But we stand for dialogue in this group, in Word. We stand for dialogue. We think we need interfaith dialogue in order to survive as a society. And we're battling people like this, religious people who would send this around, and people who are apathetic, who don't want to hear about any of this, who would rather be playing golf today or watching the Players' Championship. So we have serious headwinds that we face as an interfaith community, and I want to introduce you to some folks who can help us deal with it. I think we're going to start with Maureen. Maureen Farouk is one of our hosts, a senior fellow at WORD, whose expertise includes countering violent extremism, very topical. Also Muslim community engagement and grassroots community development. She has led field work across 80 cities and villages in Afghanistan and Pakistan, and is now researching the ability of religious actors in Egypt to counter extremist narratives in that country and abroad. Maureen regularly advises government officials on engaging Muslim communities throughout the world, and is working on developing a manual for U.S. policymakers to engage communities in preventing violent extremism. Speak from there or here, either way.
Thank you so much, Dan, for that overly kind introduction. Can everybody hear me? Is this loud enough?
Go closer.
A little bit. Is this better? I'm going to practice my karaoke skills. So I wanted to thank you, first of all, Dan, for arranging today's event. I wanted to thank you all for coming here today for this really timely topic. I wanted to kind of introduce a little bit about the work that WORD does. Many of you, I believe, have already participated in some way, shape, or form in one of our programs. But I kind of wanted to take a step back and explain sort of the methodology behind some of our programming. And I think that might kind of help address some of the questions that we have in our minds today. So for those of you who may be unfamiliar with our work, WORD uses a research-informed foundation for promoting understanding between communities to mitigate conflict. In 2011, we established the International Cultural Center, it's where we are today, to engage Montgomery County residents in a wide variety of initiatives that promote pluralism and social cohesion based on mutual respect and harmonious coexistence. So our specialists have done community building work in many countries around the world, including Pakistan, Egypt, the UK. So people often kind of wonder, well, why Montgomery County? So as many of us know, this county is home to a number of diverse ethnic and religious groups. You can just take a look around the room and you can see some of that in action. Between 2000 and 2010, the county's racial minority population rose by 40%. And according to the last census, minorities now constitute a majority of the population. So as a result, a larger portion of the population is actually foreign-born. So I wanted to highlight this because those are some pretty significant demographic shifts that have occurred in this county. So we recognize that there was a need to promote tolerance and to reduce any potential ethnic, religious, or racial divisions in our society. So essentially, Montgomery County became this ideal place where we could test out some of those best practices that we had found in community building from abroad. And we kind of wanted to use this as a testing lab to see what we could advocate other communities to do the same. What we knew was that community building wasn't easy, as we all know. And it doesn't mean just bringing diverse people together in a room. So you can't just kind of stick everyone in a room together and hope that they all get along. Social science research suggests that if you're not careful, if you bring together disparate communities, it can actually reinforce the differences amongst those groups, which can further fuel misconceptions of the other and actually increase intergroup tensions. It can backfire if you don't do it properly. So to bridge that intergroup divide successfully in ways that tend to create lasting change, we looked into decades of research in social integration theory. So I don't want to get academic on you all, but there is also a handout in the back, so if you didn't get a chance to grab that, please feel free to. But what we found in this body of research is that there are several conditions that really need to be observed in order to have a successful engagement. So first, the groups must work towards a common goal. That seems simple. Second, group members must be made to depend on each other to achieve that common goal and brought together in an environment where collaboration is sanctioned as the norm. So in other words, the point is not really a check-the-box exercise. You know, let's have an interfaith event, we'll bring one religious group, we'll have another, and for good measure, we'll throw in 15 other groups. So the point is really to bring together different audiences for a specific purpose that requires partnership and collaboration. In other words, it needs to be for a purpose that no one single entity can do on its own. Third, the groups must work in an environment where there are equal status. No group should be seen as the boss, nobody should necessarily be seen as leading or dominating over the other groups. It really has to be an equal partnership. And this is really important because, interestingly enough, if one group tends to, constantly be in the lead, it can actually reinforce negative stereotypes. So we've all been there. We've always said like, oh, that group, they always speak like this because that's just the way they are. They always do things this way because that's in their culture, right? So if you have that even playing field, then you have less chances of having those misconceptions. Fourth, it's important that the groups should be brought together in a friendly, informal setting where they interact with members of the other group in a one-on-one context sort of way. So we had participants in focus group discussions as part of an evaluation, which I will discuss in just a moment, who said that, when they came to ICC events, some of the main factors of success that kind of brought them here time and time again, and I don't mean this as a shameless plug, we're just sharing good practices here, was that, they liked being in a friendly environment. They liked the food. They liked to break bread together. And actually, the food element, which we all just thought that, secretly we're all foodies, but it really provided people an opportunity to get to know one another. So that was really key. Fifth, it was important for group members to have contact with multiple members of the other group so that they can recognize that positive interaction with, let's say, one person of that group is not just a fluke, it's not an anomaly. So, encouraging folks to get to know multiple members of the other was important. So to apply this theory, one of the cornerstones of the ICC's initial work was interfaith social action. So this is kind of described by our president, Dr. Hadi Amrahmadi, as Interfaith 2.0. It's where our programs are designed to go beyond engaging just the faith leaders in theological discussions to involving communities in hands-on projects to experience shared values. So I think this is really important. I'm actually going to repeat it. So it's when programs are designed beyond just going beyond the pulpit. You're going beyond just the leadership to actually engaging the laymen, the communities, and something that matters to everyone. And this, I really truly believe, is the key to getting the interfaith message out to a wider audience. So our signature interfaith social action program, Youth Against Hunger, which again I think some of you have participated in over the years, was originally created as a response to the State Department's 2011 Hours Against Hate. So this was an initiative where they try to get different folks to pledge to commit at least an hour a week or something to deconstruct intolerance and to promote social cohesion. So what kind of started off as this one-off event became this monthly event that grew over the next 2 years and really brought together diverse youths and families to produce food for over 800 families and individuals in local homeless shelters in the area. So our objective was to foster a sense of social responsibility. It was to foster tolerance, mutual respect, all while collaborating towards this issue of mutual concern: poverty and food insecurity issues. We also developed programs like Just Arts. So this was an initiative where youth from different ethnic and religious backgrounds used photography, videography, podcasts even, blogging to articulate concerns about issues like social alienation, cyberbullying, things that are affecting teens today. Then from 2014 to 2015, our multicultural programs were under evaluation by a National Institute of Justice funded study. So it's an independent study conducted by premier academics in the field. And that they found that our approach of being inclusive of diverse faith traditions has actually had a positive impact in our county. Specifically, our programs were effective in 5 things. So they made people feel welcome, that they were part of something bigger than themselves. It made people feel useful and helped them cultivate a sense of purpose in their lives. It provided participants with a safe space where they felt accepted, free of peer pressure. And it provided a place where participants could learn about other cultures than their own and make friendships that were actually active beyond the event. And then last, it made people feel that they were not lonely or afraid to talk to others. So you'll notice there's a lot of similarities between those conditions of success for social integration theory and then the outcomes of the evaluation. So we've built on these principles for our other programming as well. About 3 years ago, in fact almost to this day, we developed a community-led model for the prevention and intervention of violent extremism. So I always joke with everybody that, when it comes to dinner table conversations, I bring, the 2 core rules, like don't talk about religion and politics, but I do both. But, I think the reason why we were able to do that was because, again, we had a very inclusive approach. So what has been informally known as the Montgomery County model is actually currently in the process of being rebranded to the BRAVE model, which stands for Building Resilience Against Violent Extremism. And this model is essentially a public awareness and empowerment initiative to build social cohesion, to foster that resilience, while intervening in the lives of vulnerable individuals before they may engage in violence. So the model, again, is holistic in that it involves multiple faith communities, multiple ethnic communities. And we did this specifically so that we would reduce any potential stigmatization of any one particular faith community. This programming has also been evaluated by another grant that was funded by the Department of Justice, carried out by the Police Executive Research Forum. And they found that participants appreciated the religious and cultural diversity in working together towards issues of public safety. So just to recap here, in the process of collaborating together, on everything from providing food for the homeless to making public service announcements about cyberbullying or participating even in a town hall event with MCPD Police Chief Tom Major, we can deconstruct misperceptions of the other. The realization that someone of a different faith or ethnicity may share the same concerns about public safety can actually help us humanize the other and create incentives for collaboration.
Normally I like to confine my introductions to before the speaker speaks. But I wanted to point out, with respect to that cartoon that I read to you, that this organization and WORD are Muslim women run. So for those people who think that Muslims don't believe that women have any rights and want to kill all people, there's perceptions and then there's fact. The next speaker is actually one of my benefactors, and I remember talking to my own synagogue about an event that they sponsored here in Washington. I Am Your Protector brought a Holocaust survivor into a masjid, and people were shocked. They didn't think that ever happened. Same kind of thing. People's stereotypes don't fit in with reality. But Danny Lawrence is a co-founder of I Am Your Protector, which is an organization devoted to speaking and standing up for the other, meaning those whose religion, race, gender, or beliefs are different from one's own. She was born in Switzerland as a political refugee from Hungary. She has lived in the Middle East, Europe, and now the United States. She is also an interfaith activist and, like some of us, has devoted a substantial amount of effort to Jewish-Islamic encounters in particular. And her past work includes organizing an international conference, creating multiple NGOs, and initiating a documentary film for French television.
Thank you. I know that Nazli Chaudhry is the director of the DC chapter, and she's the one who brought Johanna Neumann, the Holocaust survivor, to a mosque.
Cannot hear what you're saying.
Yeah,
Oh,
you should.
sorry. Oh, yeah.
Can you?
Yeah, I'll leave that
Okay.
here. So I just want to say that Nazli Chaudhry is the director of I'm Your Protector in DC, and she's the one who brought Johanna Neumann, you mentioned, who's a Holocaust survivor, who was telling her story in a masjid, and she was telling the story of how she was saved by Muslims during the Holocaust. So I'll share with you.
JIDS drafted her in the first round this year of the interfaith draft, so claim credit for that.
Thank you so much for having me. So I'll share with you a little bit about I'm Your Protector, which, as you said, is a community of people who speak up and stand up for each other across lines of divide and even conflict. We have an 80% success rate in triggering transformation among people who have hateful views, and our focus is reaching out to the people who are often perceived as being the unreachable, and people who by definition are not the one who usually are going to interfaith or to environment where they can be exposed to other communities they're biased toward. So we have two goals. One is to deconstruct the root cause of hatred, in particular in communities who are hateful and who are not the choir of interface, and the other piece is building a large-scale movement of people who will be each other protectors. And in history there's a large number of examples, and I'll share a few with you, of people who stood up for each other, including in times of genocide, conflict, and war. And so it's an example of what we can do even in times of peace or rising tension. So I'll share a few examples. Albania, for example, during the Second World War, was the only country in Europe that had more Jews after the Holocaust than before. Because their moral code called Besa says that you have to protect the stranger as much as your own. And so both the king and the people of Albania hid Jews in their own houses, risking their lives by taking them in, sometimes for a few months, sometimes for a few years. Morocco, where the king, when the Nazis brought a number of yellow stars for the Jewish community of Morocco, he said, add 20, and they asked why, and he said, because me and the royal family will wear it too. And they refused to have the Jews wear the star, and right after, the king invited all the rabbis of all of Morocco to join the palace for the yearly event he has as a gathering, which was a very strong message to the Nazis. And that also gives a message that hatred is only possible when the masses are silent and accepting, and when we refuse, we have the power to stop even people like Hitler. And I'll share more about that a little later. So we looked into what were the root cause of hatred and what was the common denominator across all conflict, wars, and genocide, which obviously have their own specificities politically, socially, economically, and in the time and environment the situation is taking place in. But there's one common denominator of hatred and violence, is when masses are led to believe that a group is a monolithic block, and that block is a threat to them. So when Hitler got in power, he didn't really have a lot of following until he framed the whole issue by saying Jews, gays, communists, etc. are an existential threat to the Aryan people, and we have to defend and protect. And it was the same in ex-Yugoslavia, where there was a very high level of trust, where people thought of each other as brothers under Tito and during the communist regime. And Milosevic almost overnight succeeded to turn against communities that had high level of trust, knew each other, were neighbors, studied together, there was a high level of intermarriage, and people started shooting at each other across apartments in the same building block. Same in Rwanda, where there were some tension, but overall Hutus and Tutsis used to live together. And after the narrative that depicted the group as a monolithic bloc and that bloc being a threat to them, allowed to unleash violence that led to genocide. And this is what we're assisting to in Europe and here and in other places too, where today the narrative towards Muslim is depicting the Muslim community as being a monolithic bloc and that bloc being a threat, which also allows to put that group in a position of defending and protecting. And we see that also on an individual level. If someone commits a murder, kills someone, he's going to be a murderer, but if he can convince that he was defending and protecting, nothing's going to happen to him. And so that's also what's happening on a mass scale. If a country can depict the situation as being defending and protecting, it allows and legitimates hatred and even violence. So I'll come back to that in a minute. So if we agree that the common denominator of hatred is the idea that we depict a group as a monolithic bloc and that bloc is being a threat to us, it has to be broken down in an emotional way, because hatred is created based on emotions, and facts in themselves are not effective. It has been proven. And so what we've seen is that if we present people that they perceive as being their enemies who are their protectors, so for example exposing Jews and Christians who are fearing Muslims, exposing them to stories of Muslims who were protectors of Jews or Muslims who were protectors of Christians, totally transforms their perception. And that works with any groups. It can be men, women, black, white, Jewish, Muslim, Christian, any categories that is depicted as a monolithic bloc and a threat. So I'll share with you one of the activities we did in Reaching the Unreachable, which is specifically not having events that are interfaith, but going to the communities themselves where people who would not set foot in an interfaith event are reached. So that's one of the things we did. So recently we had actually 2 weeks ago in one of the largest synagogues in New York, we had an exhibition for Yom HaShoah, the Holocaust Day. We had an exhibition of Muslims who risked their life to save Jews during the Holocaust, and there were Iranians, Turks, Moroccan, Tunisian, Algerian, Pakistanis, Indians, and many more. And we had an Islamic scholar who is from Pakistan, Mehnaz Afridi, who's also the head of the Holocaust Center at the Manhattan College, who talked about those stories. And so the crowd there was a crowd that was going to the Holocaust commemoration, not a crowd that was a self-selected group of people who wanted to hear some interfaith conversations. Another thing we did was a large-scale public campaign in New York where we had large invisible screens on which you couldn't see anything unless seen through special glasses which we distributed that plays with the content, see things differently, and how we don't have access to certain information. That's why the screen was blank, but once you discover the stories, it was a lot of stories of protectors across different communities with a focus of Muslim protectors. So I'll see if I can play the video for you. And I might need to have some help, because I was saying my grandma who's 88 is much better than me with technology. Not flattering for me, she's not that great. Can someone rescue me? Sorry. It's supposed to be here, but... Yeah, I can go on YouTube and maybe... How do I get on? Not pretty. Thank you so much. Or maybe if I just go inside of this. Yeah, I can make sure. Oops. I'm sorry about that. Oh, it's here, it's here. Okay, great. It's happening. Oh, wait, no, it's not happening. Oh, thank you so much. But now it disappeared.
I'm sorry, Mom.
C'est next one.
Sorry. In the meanwhile, you can see my dad and me when I was a baby playing chess. Okay. Yeah, sure. If not, it doesn't matter. We'll just...
This is what you call building expectations.
It doesn't work in 2 seconds, we'll just drop it. Okay, we'll drop it.
Can somebody work the mic?
We'd like to take a few questions. I'm sure we could spend the next 80 minutes just taking Q&A. We're not going to do that because we want to have small group discussions. But we do want to take a few questions for the panel.
Thank you so much to all the presenters for these excellent talks, and most importantly, they're not just talks. What we really heard and saw is concrete examples of what can and should be done. I don't know about you, but in my late 40s, let's put it this way, I'm becoming a little bit tired of just talking. Talk is good, but talk is cheap. And it's when you really take this talk and turn it into positive, constructive action on the ground is when you see a positive change really happening, which is really the most commendable thing in all the examples we saw from all the speakers today. So thank you so much again for that. I think that what needs and should be done is eradicating ignorance, because ignorance is really the key and main enemy. I was giving a talk yesterday about facts and falsehoods about Islam and Muslims to a group of women who are American university graduates. They're called the AAUW, which is the American Association of University Women. And I was surprised at some of the questions I was asked. The questions are about Sharia law, the concept of jihad. And one woman said, why are you wearing this scarf, this hijab? Isn't this a symbol that you are associating yourself with the powers of evil in this world? I mean, I said, can you say that again, ma'am? I could not register right away. My mind cannot register the question. She said, yeah, when I see you wearing this hijab on your head, what I think of automatically is that you are associating yourself with the powers of evil in this world. I said, oh, she made herself now very clear. So I told her, well, I left my country, Egypt, and I came here to America because we are looking for freedom in America. We are looking for inclusion. We are looking for diversity. We are looking for acceptance. And for me, my veil is nothing more than a religious, identity. It's a religious identity, and it's just like praying and fasting and pilgrimage and any other form of religious, commitment. The only difference is it's visible. You can just see it. That's all. Nothing more than that. The fact that some people out there in the world might associate it with, quote unquote, the evil powers, that does not mean that I should change the way I dress or the way other Muslim women dress. Because if that happens and we are so intimidated and fearful to declare who we are and to declare our identity and to stick to our own values and beliefs and declare them publicly, then this is not the America I want to live in. This is not what America is all about, right? So at the end of the lecture, she came and we shook hands and she said thank you, and that was a useful moment. But that we're talking about here, please, we're talking about university graduates. I was not talking to a group of people who never went to school. Please be careful here. It's a very, for me, that was a remarkable experience. You're talking about university graduates, and here you are hearing these kinds of questions and issues about Sharia law and jihad and the veil being a symbol of the powers of evil in the world. So we have a lot of work to be done collectively. Not just as Muslims, as Jews, as Christians, as Buddhists, as Hindus, as people of no faith, as members of this human family. What can and should be done to eradicate ignorance, which is our greatest, number one main enemy? And education does not just happen in schools, does not just happen in colleges. It happens in mosques, churches, synagogues, community centers, events like this. So we need to see more of that and to put this into action. And point number 2 is youth engagement. And I think ICC and World has been doing a great job in terms of youth engagement, getting young people on board. Yes, we are helping and we're trying to do our best, but let's face it, we are all sandwiched between gazillions of responsibilities. And as we get older, it gets worse. It does not get any better. So younger people, while they're still having all of this energy and time and they want to change the world, let them change the world in the most constructive and positive way. And instead of being co-opted, God forbid, by some of the powers of evil in the world, right? The real powers of evil in the world, right? That could really be problematic. How can we build on youth energy and engagement and get them involved and get them on board and have them be involved in programs and events like this and other activities and let them tell us what should and could be done. We can learn a lot from our young people. My son, Mustafa, my older son, whenever I tell him about JIDS, he says, that's good, but it's not good enough. I said, what do you mean? He said, don't you see the very same people in every single meeting? I said, pretty much. Well, that means you're just talking to yourselves. That's what he says, right? So he's now in Egypt, but when he comes back, I want to get him on board, right? So, I mean, seriously, he said, you're talking to yourselves, the same people every time. What about those who don't believe in dialogue? The Muslims who would never talk to a Jew, the Jew who would never talk to a Muslim. These are the people you want to reach. So let's really work harder, I think, to put all of that into effect in practical steps. Thank you again. Thank you so much.
Should I take off this symbol of evil, by the way?
First of all, I want to thank the panelists. I think it was really very moving. All three presentations were very moving and wonderful. I think that two points that together make something very, very important is the fact that that maybe one of the things that limits some of our conversations is the fact that we call ourselves interfaith. And we ignore the fact, as the Imam mentioned, that the majority of the people and the number that is growing more than anything else is secularism. And once you say we are an interfaith group, you are basically rejecting 80% of the people because, this is religious stuff, I'm not interested. Maybe we should call ourselves in a different way, and therefore we can attract more people who are belonging to our cultures, but maybe not to our religious faith.
If one of you wants to respond to a statement, you should. So we can take more questions, or one of you can respond at any time.
I have a bad memory, so I don't want to lose my thought. I'll just jump in. I actually wanted to respond to some of the things that Sahar had brought up, which I think are really important. One of the initiatives that we had developed here through the ICC is actually an after-school leadership development program called Global Citizens Forum. And so this is something in which we are trying to work with, in technical academic terms, it's known as peer gatekeeper training. So it's this belief that peers are most likely to recognize vulnerability amongst their social networks, and that that friends will be more comfortable engaging these peer leaders and soliciting their help if they are in need. So what we wanted to do was to provide some kind of training to encourage students to understand what are the various potential risk factors or indicators of vulnerability, whether it's feeling depression or feeling socially alienated, somebody who might be bullied, discriminated against, and then providing these students with the coping skills. So helping them understand, what do you do when you see somebody who's being bullied? How can you become an abstander? I was mentioning to Imam Majid earlier that one of the events that we had done just a couple of weeks ago was really, really great. I personally found it very empowering. We had brought together some residents from an elderly community who, some of them were 80, 90 years old, and they were sharing their stories about what it was like to flee, Nazi Germany, what it was like to be a Japanese American living in an internment camp. So it's really, I think, powerful for a lot of the students. We had brought together participants of our Global Citizens Forum to meet with these, older citizens to find out, what was it like then to be faced with the discrimination? How did you survive? What were your coping skills? And it was, I think, very important for them to understand that, these are difficult times, but you can succeed, you can overcome them. And, just building on this point of ignorance, it was really powerful. At the end, the students kind of shared one thing that they wanted to commit towards in the future, and some of them said that we can't necessarily change people's attitudes and beliefs, but at least perhaps what we can do is just put a smile on our face, engage people who might be scared of us. I saw Hadia in the back, so I was shy to speak in front of her, but one of the things that that I've heard her say a number of times is it's really difficult to hate up close. And so for a lot of the younger generation, it was really powerful to hear them say that if somebody is looking at me kind of in a sense of apprehension, maybe the least I could do is smile. And I thought that was really, really powerful. Is that encouraging youth, I think, to go beyond their comfort zone and to provide them also those coping skills is really important.
Is this program ongoing? I just wanted to know if this program is ongoing and could we advertise it?
Yeah,
I mean, this is
I'm
something.
looking at it.
Yeah, you're gonna do the next one, Mama Mona.
She was asking a question.
I'm going to come out of the closet here. I am a Lutheran pastor. I'm on several email lists for interfaith dialogue, and this came up on my email list. I don't live too far from here, and I thought, I'm going to show up. I'm particularly interested in this topic because I've been very involved in interfaith dialogue and issues for 8 or 9 years now. And I've served 3 churches in this area. One was in D.C. They were very, very active, very supportive of interfaith dialogue. The other 2 have been suburban churches, and when I try to engage them in excitement, they'll go, yeah, but what about the church budget? We got to meet the budget. So trying to engage people in this and the need is something I'm so excited to hear that there are specific techniques, and I hope we all can access those. Also, as the Imam said, we do have differences, and I was so happy to hear you say that, because we are not served by everybody being homogenous and holding hands and having a kumbaya moment, as you said. We are served by observing the other and saying, wow, that's not me, but what you have is beautiful. And learning from each other. I am a better Christian in Tokar. We'll all expose our symbols of identity, and as some people would call hatred, there's mine, as well as this collar here. But we are served best by looking at the other and learning. Krister Stendahl called that holy envy, looking at the other and saying, no, I'm not you, and you're not me. And I'm glad of that. I'm glad we are different, because otherwise I couldn't learn from you. So thank you. Thank you very much. And the relationship building as primary, I think that's where we have to start, with people getting to know each other as people. So thanks. I'm so glad this came up in my email.
Okay, but wait, you wanted?
Yes, I just want to say one thing before. I think one of the issues that we need to think about also, that associating religion with political labels. What I mean by that, liberal, conservative. It's very interesting to me. I have seen the most conservative religious group of people, sometimes they want Muslim to be liberal. Because they think, to be honest with you, I've been in those conversations. They are not comfortable with conservative Muslims. Therefore, they will, if Muslims are socially conservative, for them that is not a good thing. Therefore, they will attack Muslims for the same thing they believe in it. But the Muslims should not have those, because that means they're devoted to their religion and their respect. That discomfort, and by the way, this is across the board. We have Sufi scholars who are socially conservative. If you go to the Pakistan and Marinos, that people might be socially conservative in how they think. But we'll have a group of people who says, we cannot do interfaith with this group because maybe they believe that only a man can lead the prayer. They are not open enough. Okay? One of the things that I would like to address in the interfaith work is that how can you accept a person does not prescribe your interpretation of religion, because sometimes you might have yourself in Christian and Jewish or a Muslim might have a particular interpretation of religion. that maybe want to impose on someone else. And that person says, if you're not like this, you're not good enough. It is not my business to impose my theology on somebody else. But it's my business to make sure that my rights being protected and the rights of that person being protected. That's what I really want to see in America, to change that discourse of try to define who is a good Muslim, a bad Muslim, who is a good Christian, a bad Christian, who is good Jewish and bad Jewish. Every Jewish and Christians and Muslims and Buddhists and Hindus and so forth have a right to be who they are, no matter what they believe look like. That's one thing. Second issue I'd like to bring is the issue that you brought very eloquently, the issue of the youth. How can we take this dialogue from the adult levels and to really a youth movement? And I think that transformation can happen in the youth levels. I know some of the, establishment in our religion are not open enough sometimes. But if you have the youth maybe they are the one later bring the change, because they are the one who become the member of the board of the organization, they become the leaders of our mosque and the church and synagogue and so forth. What I really, and JIDS, really thank you for bringing this topic and confronting it, that we've been singing the same song for a long time, but we have not been performing for others. Thank you.
I see a lot of hands raised, and as I told you, we could go through this for 100 minutes. But I think what we'd like to do is break right now into small groups, then we will return to the big group. But we're going to lose some folks now, and I wanted to allow that to happen out of courtesy. So we have, I'm figuring we can break up into 6 groups. And I've got some suggested questions for the small group discussions to pass out. Maybe in each group there's somebody who can serve as a kind of a note taker, and then we can return to the large group for the last few minutes. Maybe take 25 minutes or so for the small groups. So if you don't mind breaking into maybe 3 over here and 3 over there, we can continue it when the small groups are over.
But by the way, we need to acknowledge imams in the audience. We have 2 imams, alhamdulillah.
Doing an Imam and Muslim community roundtable event. So for our Muslim participants, we'd love to see you there, and of course, inshallah, we have other interfaith discussions in the future that are welcome and open to everyone. But we're really looking forward to this being an opportunity where some of the Muslim community leaders can come together and discuss some of these difficult questions about promoting public safety and community resilience against violent extremism. So I do hope you can join us for that. The flyers are in the back.
Anyway, question number 1 was about if it bleeds, it leads, and what can you do about that? And I spoke as an old media person about how it frustrates the hell out of me because I went from media into Muslim-Jewish relations and how hard it is to get, oftentimes, the media to cover. And somebody said, I thought it was a very important comment, which was, we should not assume that the media is only going to be, if it bleeds, it leads. There's a good piece of that, and but the media will cover a good human interest story. So somebody mentioned the example a week ago, which I somehow missed that story, of the efforts of religious communities, I guess, in Canada to help Syrian refugees, and what they're doing in very real kind of human terms, not only to give a lot of love and kindness, but also to help them with jobs and training and many other things. So that's a really good example. And I noted that in a couple of weeks we're going to be having, together with Rabbi Jeff Sachs at his synagogue in Virginia, Northern Virginia, is going to be hosting Syrian refugees as part of the Syrian Welcome Dinner effort. And so it'll be interesting to see if how the coverage works on that one. Number 2, should we try to tackle some controversial issue in order to wake people up about the importance of the interfaith movement? There was a lot of feeling in our group, I guess, about the idea of an anti-bullying campaign. that could really, that is incredibly important because that brings in many other issues, and it also gets to the youth, being so important. So maybe that is an effort that the groups should engage in. We also talked about various other social service efforts, such as Habitat for Humanity, Feeding the Hungry. I talked about working together against Islamophobia and anti-Semitism. People talked about the wonderful new Sisterhood of Salam Shalom movement and how that's spreading. So, yeah, that there was a lot of feeling that we've got to really come together and get behind causes that are meaningful and help people. And somebody mentioned also, I think, the point that had been made earlier that we should not necessarily only, tag it as interfaith, but rather that we need to give space to non-religious folks to feel, or people who feel that they're secular, that they should be involved. We didn't get a lot beyond that because we were so into all that. What can the places of worship be doing? Are they doing all that they can to broaden interest in the interfaith movement? Obviously not, and that needs to be worked on. But I think I'll stop there because that's about as far as we got.
Excellent.
So group 2 is over there.
Group 2, right. We are number 4. Who is speaking for this group? Sorry.
I am. Yes, I am.
Yes, you are.
I was taking the notes, so I guess I am.
Hi, I'm Nazli Chowdhury, and I think our group really didn't go by the questions. I just kind of entered into the group while they were deeply within their discussion, and so I'll talk about what they were talking about, the younger generation, reaching out to the younger generation. And it was pointed out that all of us older folks are sitting here talking about how to reach out to the younger generation, and there's no one here to represent them really. And so someone suggested we need modes of communication that the young are using to communicate with them. Social media, and Sahar suggested investing in and or creating social media venues that are more amenable to reaching to the younger generation, and more interactive, that they can have a say in creating and also in perpetuating and continuing with that. What else did we say? We also talked about peer training. We talked about the importance of, if we're going to reach out to youth, whether it's within our faith communities or in general, we need to reach out to them and train them so they can lead their own groups. I think that's what we implement, their own groups. And then we also talked about what has worked in other faith communities and within their communities, that reaching out to and bringing in communities. And we talked about a project called the Twinning Project. It's through the Foundation for Ethnic Understanding, and they've been doing this for a number of years, mostly in New York. But they twin mosques, and it started in New York, but it's spread all over the United States. They twin mosques and synagogues together so that they can come together. Usually they do one day to do programs together, whether it's social action programs or visit each other's places of worship and do something, but and hoping that they will build a relationship and continue the programs even after the twinning event. We talked about faith in action, doing things that are good for all of the community, but different faiths collaborating and doing the events together, but that benefits everyone, whether you have a faith or not faith. So we talked about those as important. I think that was about it. Did I miss anything?
You talked about your experience in New York and how you made the groups themselves.
Oh, okay. So I shared my experience in. We also talked about how the youth are kind of leaving the faith synagogues or mosques and whatnot. We call it the unmosquing of youth, because they feel like they're not being represented and they don't have a say in their faith communities, and so they're leaving in droves. And I talked about when I founded a youth group in our mosque was I gathered the youth and I asked them, what would you want, what would you like to do if we formed a youth group in our mosque? Would you come, and what would bring you here? And they shared things with me, and based on that we formed a youth group. But we made it as a faith in action. We didn't sit there and preach them religion. We talked about why it's important to take care of the hungry in our, why it's important to beautify our gardens, and why it's important to know how other people have dealt with hate crimes and whatnot. Like, so we made a trip to the Holocaust Museum, and we planted vegetables and fruits in our own mosque campus, and then donated the food. So we did things like that. We did blood donations, and then it just grew from there. And so getting the youth involved within their faith communities the way they want to be involved, I think is key and really important.
Sure.
Before she entered the group, we were just, at least I expressed the concern that the questions seemed premised on a different approach than what we were presented with by the speakers, which is to reach people where they are and bring speakers in to talk about things. And so that was another point that we, at least I thought was important.
Group over there. Spokesperson for the group that was in that corner.
Thanks, Steve.
They all left?
No, I mean, you took the lead. I just want to say, wait, we have no representative from the group.
All right. Okay.
I thought we had another spokesperson, but apparently not. So we were a little bit all over the map, but there were a few themes in our conversation. There was a recognition of the importance of youth engagement and the importance of that target demographic to include young adults, although someone acknowledged that it is oftentimes or can be the older generation that is transmitting the negative messaging to the younger, so these are all target populations. There was a lot of time spent on holding the press accountable, and I think that might be one of the major themes that we talked about, how to do that, how individual houses of worship acting alone don't have a lot of impact, but if in an interfaith environment, if we speak with one voice, perhaps that would be more impactful. There was talk about taking advantage of resources within our own communities. Somebody mentioned having an NPR journalist in their congregation, and I'm sure we all have those types of influential people in our communities who perhaps can be leveraged. Somebody mentioned the great work that is done in the secular world with branding and name recognition, like with the Avon blog and cancer fundraising initiatives, and how this is very influential and successful. And if there could be an interfaith social action umbrella that is not associated with any particular faith group, but is us, people who care, that could be very impactful, although someone else pointed out that literally takes years and years to get off the ground. Folks, anything else? Help me out.
No, I think you.
There was some talk about one congregation, one Presbyterian congregations, yes? Episcopalian, sorry, imminent adoption of a Syrian family, Syrian refugee family, and how you can work with other faith communities to support them and to support all of the Syrian refugees who are coming our way.
All right, one final one. The last group, Sabir's group.
Shalom. I'm glad I'm the last one because everyone was so good, they covered everything, I don't have to say anything. And also they took such detailed notes, I didn't take that many notes. The main couple of points that we made, one of them, and I'm going to ask Jim to read his statement in more details, is that the current political campaign is an opportunity for us that interfaith community should hold the political leaders accountable for all the negative things they are saying and somehow get them to stop saying those things. And the method that we came up with was, and I'm sorry that Majid left, the method was that we need a name recognition imam, like Majid, name recognition pastor, anybody, and I know a priest, McCarrick, and a name recognition rabbi to join hands together and write an op-ed that should draw attention of the political leadership. That was the method we came up with. And the recent leaders have to be asked, demanded, they should condemn all these negative things, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, and everything that's negative. They should openly condemn it. They should be required to do it. How do we do it? We don't know. But they should be required to do that. And it was mentioned that Muslim voices are being voiced, but they are not reaching out because media is not paying attention to them. Dan was held responsible to make sure that Muslim voices are heard. The interfaith community should do something to make sure that Muslim voices that are already being voiced should be promoted, that they're. And then, of course, we all talk about the key is young people, but we don't know how to reach out to them. And we should, one way is to launch programs in high schools and colleges and try to induce them to get more involved. And there is a very strong statement that Jim wrote, and I want him to read it.
Probably most of you have heard about Grover Norquist and his anti-tax pledge that he has foisted on candidates across the country. And candidates have, with a certain amount of trepidation, signed up on his anti-tax pledge because they fear what the consequences would be of not signing the pledge. Well, there are all sorts of pledges that could be put forward, and national interfaith leaders have a unique credibility and a unique authority when speaking about values. And if national interfaith leaders could put together a pledge document and ask candidates across the country, without regard to party affiliation, ask candidates across the country for congressional office to sign a pledge saying they uphold certain values, including respect for religion, respect for differences, respect for pluralism, condemn things such as xenophobia, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism. The wording should be at the determination of national faith leaders who are certainly better equipped put together such a declaration on high. But the idea is that all candidates for national public office should be asked to take this pledge, which is antithetical, thank you, to Christian, Jewish, and Muslim moral values. We need to speak with a mass national interfaith voice, urging local interfaith groups across the country to present candidates to national office in their localities with the pledge and ask them to take it, and hold them accountable for sticking to their pledge. And I do believe that the press would seize on these things, because this would be something sensational if a candidate for national office refused to take a pledge put together by national Catholic, Protestant, Jewish, Muslim, whatever religious leaders.
I think on that point right now, the most active thing is Representative Don Beyer from Virginia, and I think several others just put forth legislation basically saying, you know, it is forbidding the banning of a particular religious group from the United States. And so that's out there, and I think that's something that we could all unite around. We should be pushing. I mean, I think a lot of this stuff has been a little bit tricky because it's appeared to be partisan, and a lot of, you know, religious institutions with 501c3. But I gather this one is written specifically so that it, you know, doesn't, you know, single out necessarily any particular candidate, although we know which candidate has taken the other position. So I think that's one, and so yeah, I think that there's a number. Imam Majid also was involved, as somebody said, in a similar pledge. So anyway, yeah, that's the kind of thing we should be getting behind.
Well, we're past time, but I wanted to give a couple of people an opportunity to just speak very briefly. We don't have anybody who's going to respond. And go ahead, Jenny.
Oh, here.
Just a couple of very short statements.
Oh, I just wanted to say regarding the political movement, Virginia, which is not that far from us, they need help with voter registration. You might be aware that 200,000 plus former felons have now been given back the right to vote. Virginia was one of the last ones to keep people from voting once they've served all their sentences. So there's an organization called the New Virginia Majority, which is doing nonpartisan voting registration, but they are targeting communities that, let's put it this way, would be very afraid if Donald Trump became president. And particularly when I spoke to the woman there about it, that's heading up the drives, she was really excited when I said I was from a church, St. Columba's Episcopal, because they're trying to reach out to faith communities within Virginia to have drives at their churches, particularly black churches. But also, in fact, as we spoke on Friday, and she says, I'm standing outside of a mosque right now. So that's other places they want to do. So if you Google them, that's probably just the easiest way. New Virginia Majority, and their volunteer page. Most of it was talking about stuff like if you lived in Virginia, it would be appropriate checked off. I just put in the comment box that I was willing to, you know, to volunteer for voter registration. She got back to me very quickly and was really excited because they'd like to leverage the churches in Virginia as places, and also getting people to go out because they'll be doing it at shopping centers, and they'll eventually get names of people they don't think are registered to vote, because turnout's going to be critical. Virginia is a, what's the word?
A swing state.
Swing state, yes, thank you.
Okay, I think we have enough of an exodus that I want to say thank you for coming, and we'll let you know by email when we have our next event.
Okay, thank you. Oh, nice people too. Interesting people. Which group were you in? Maryland, Virginia. Virginia, where do you live? All different people. So all over North Virginia. That's how it works.
You're not out of the closet.
My husband's just because I was going
What I heard today, we should be catering to non-alcoholics too. That was one of the points, so you're too much in the fold. You should say, I hate Jews and Muslims, and we should say, welcome, you're in the right place. I try to be educated.
That's very exciting. And your name is? It's Andra, and because I have a store in Fair Oaks Mall, and I've been, the hours are the mall hours, so it's like, it's, 10 in the morning till 10 in the evening. It's just so long. I haven't been able to be as active about it.
And he said his two kids are nuts. It took me a minute.
Right.
So this is actually pretty funny. We have a God, the Jew, the Christian, the Muslim, and an atheist. And now our atheist is threatening to leave. So it sounds like a joke, right? The rabbi walked into a bar. So we're actually going through this now. I'm like trying to find just the right atheist.